You're listening to Conversations with Chanda, a podcast that unpacks the community's grittiest, most vexing problems, hosted by Chanda Smith Baker. Up next, we have Deborah Montgomery, a trailblazing figure in law enforcement, made history as the first female police officer in St. Paul in 1975. In her distinguished 28-year career, she rose to the rank of senior commander and earned recognition of her dedication to serving the community. She was a senior commander, retired St. Paul Police Department, former assistant commissioner of Department of Public Safety for the state of Minnesota, the former adjunct professor of the Minnesota State Community College System, and former St. Paul City Council member. Now retired, she continues her mission by supporting and empowering the next generation of leaders.
I was adopted by my grandparents.
Okay.
And there's some Native in our family too, but I don't know a lot about it. I just found out because I met my dad when I was 21 years old.
Oh, wow.
In a bar.
In a bar?
I was in a bar, and he came up to me and told me he was my dad. And I said, who the hell are you? I go to my grandma, which to me was my mother because they raised me. I said, this guy said he's my dad. And we never talked about illegitimacy in the house. Mm-hmm. So she said, well, your mother happens to be here. Why don't you go upstairs and ask her? And I'm thinking, how do I go ask my mother? So anyway, I go upstairs and say, this guy said he's my dad. And she said, what's his name? And I told her. And she said, yeah. So where does the conversation go?
Oh, nowhere. Look, my fear is I'm going to be in a bar and someone's going to come up and be like, I'm your brother. I'm your sister. I'll be like, oh, God, Dad, what'd you do?
So then when, so anyway, I was married and had my kids. So my husband was gracious enough to say, well, you're welcome to come and meet your grandkids. But every time he came over, he was drunk at the beginning. And so Robert said, you can't come over here like that. So when he came over and he was drunk, he was talking. When he came over sober, he didn't say much.
Oh, see. You have been a trailblazer in this space, and as you have had your tenure in law enforcement and retired, people honor you for all of the things that you have done, and you have earned that and you deserve that. But that's not why you got into policing. Did you know that you were pioneering and trailblazing when you were in it?
I didn't want this job. I was a city planner, and what had happened was Ron Jones, who was the EEO officer for the city, the NAACP had filed a lawsuit against the city of St. Paul. They had 600 police officers. They only had 4 African Americans. 10% of the population was African American. So they filed a lawsuit, and from 1971 to 1974, the city wasn't going to be demanded by the NAACP, so they didn't hire. In 1974, they had a life safety issue because they had retirements, and they needed to hire. And Miles Lord said, looking back at the NAACP lawsuit, a percentage of your new hires has to be African American. So then the city said they were going to hire 50, and Miles Lord said 10 had to be African American. So they posted the test. Now, they hadn't hired from 71 to 74. They posted the test. I believe 2,000 people signed up. They did, in order to get hired, they had a background, a psychological, a medical, a physical agility test. There were 7 parts to the test. Well, the part that is to me the hardest was the physical agility test, because back then it was the West Point military physical agility test. You had to run 25 yards, get over a 4-foot fence, 25 yards, climb a ladder, go down in the cylinder, get out, 25 yards, get over a 6-foot fence. I mean, all of this, is it relevant to what the job is? That's a question. But it was a timed obstacle course. In my younger days, I was a jock.
Okay.
And so everybody in the community knew. I mean, I outran, out-hit, outdid everything with the boys. So when I took the test, out of, and I'll say 200 women, I don't know how many there was, I was the only woman that passed, and only 8 men did better than I did. So at that point, they offered me the job. there's a letter in my file saying, thank you for the opportunity. It's a $10,000 cut in pay. I'm not crazy. And so, I'm going and doing my business. The Friday before the academy started, one of the 10 African-American men dropped out. The only person the mayor had control of was me because I was already a city employee. He said, I need you to do me a favor, go sit in the academy for 2 weeks so we can get it started. I said, who's going to make the difference up? He said, don't worry, I'll be taken care of. I always say, don't trust a politician. That's a whole nother story.
It's a predictable story, though.
So anyway, I'm in the academy. I'm at the top of my academy. I'm able to do everything that the average man could do. But academically, I was at the top of my academy. In the meantime, I had a master's degree. You only needed a GED. So I had 9 African-American men. Now I'm married. I got 4 kids at home. And I would come home and take care of my family. And then I had to go tutor the other 9 African-American men so that they could pass the quizzes that we had every day. And I was pretty good at picking out the questions that they were going to ask. So, we were able to get through all of that. I say that not bragging, but just to say there was a journey that was going on, and I'm only supposed to be there for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, I get a call from the mayor's office. Can you stay 2 more weeks?
Oh.
I said, who's taking care of this salary? He said, don't worry, you're going to be taken care of. So at the end of a month, I'm doing well. I'm taking care of the rest of them. And I thought to myself, I don't want this job, but if I drop out, they'll say a woman can't do it, and there was nothing that I couldn't do that these men were doing. So I said, well, I'm going to stay through this 16 weeks just to let them know that a woman can get through this. So I did. At the end of 16 weeks, we were in the academy. I did all of the stuff we were supposed to be doing, but we didn't have real bullets in our gun, and we hadn't driven the squad car with the red lights and siren. I said, for these 16 weeks of hell, I want to drive the squad car and put some real bullets in this gun. And so I said, well, I'm going to do this field training where you had somebody. And that was a whole nother journey because none of the officers wanted to be with me, and they gave me some of the toughest officers to ride with. And the one guy who I love dearly today, I get in the car, and back then they had bench seats. They didn't have bucket seats.
Oh, wow.
So the average height was 6 feet tall. I was 5'6 3/4. So when I get in the car to drive, I pull the seat up. This guy next to me said, oh, no, this ain't working. Get out of here and go over here and be the passenger. Well, the passenger is the report writer. So I didn't get to drive the squad car with the red lights and sirens. But the investigators, the prosecutors, and the judges and juries loved my reports because I could write complete sentences. I could spell. That part was doing well, but just dealing with the squad car piece was,
Right.
I didn't get to do what a real police officer would get to do.
So each step intrigued you a little bit more. One of the points you made on the front end, which I think is interesting, was that they had a staffing shortage. And here we are again, faced with a staffing shortage, not just in Minneapolis and St. Paul police departments, but really across the nation. And when we think about who we want in those seats, there are people like you that have experience with community. They come through community. They understand how poverty intersects with other things. Find pathways, right, that begin with trust. If someone is out there and, especially us, the women, right, thinking that they wanted to serve the community and find ways to move us to a more just reality, what would you say to them?
Where's your commitment to the public? Are you willing to deal with people that are in crisis? Most of the people that deal with the police, there's something going on. So to be able to identify what the crisis is and to see how you can deal with it. The scary part now, and this is different from when I was on, is everybody's got a gun. Everybody's got a gun. So your antennas are up when you're having contacts. You're looking to be safe, but also to provide a service. If the person in crisis doesn't know how to deal with that conversation, we see a lot more guns being pulled, and that heightens the issue. And, you know, the public looks at it on the outside. Well, why are the police, you know, using more
Deadly force.
So, I mean, it's not that we can't not use it, but how do you deal with somebody that's at a heightened awareness already and they're coming at you with force?
Yeah, I hear the point. But aside from our Kim Porter that killed Dante Wright, you don't hear of a lot of women that are using deadly force that are in law enforcement. So there's got to be a difference in the way that women approach these issues.
Well, I'm kind of an atypical person. I'm always trying to sweet talk somebody.
Okay.
Hey, baby, hey, what's going on? Come on, tell me what's going on. You know, first of all, let's calm down, take a breath, and tell me, okay, why are we having this interaction? I just need you to tell me that so that I can try to help you help yourself. I mean, that's where I'm at. I think women are more communicative, and I don't know, I think I know I have more patience, you know, but, you know, it takes patience. When people are in crisis, you can't just jump to an issue.
Yeah.
So one, you have to calm them so you can get to the point where they're at. And some people don't calm right away, you know, so they may become more aggressive. And so then you have to take that next step to say, okay, we may have to put hands on. Well, when you put hands on, instead of the escalation goes up.
Yeah.
But if we're not communicating, what are we doing? I mean, you know, you're flagging around and everything. Calm down. And like I say, some people just don't calm down right away. So we're trying to use those skills that we've been taught to try to deal with those situations. I don't know.
If you were to go back onto the force, what would you ask for and what would you demand?
Respect. I don't think that when I got on the job that I was respected. I was treated by the administration and by my fellow officers as...
What made you stay?
That's a good question. I think the best thing they did for me that they didn't realize is they put me in a squad car by myself because nobody would work with me. So I could patrol like I wanted to patrol. I was a city planner, budget analyst, grants and aids coordinator. I was all of that, and I dealt with the public all the time. And so if I pulled somebody over, and this was in the old days when you could do this, you can't do it now, but if I pulled somebody over and said, do you know why I stopped you? And they'll say no, most of the time. And I'd say, well, your tail light's out, your headlight's out, your muffler, whatever, because it was usually a mechanical. I'm on midnights.
Yeah.
So the majority of time, they put me in the highest crime area in the city in a one-person car when everybody else had 2 men in it. And I had 42 bars on my beat. So what I needed to make sure is I didn't get hit by a DWI.
Yeah.
So if I pulled somebody over and asked them told them why I was pulling them over, if they were residents, because it was a low-income white neighborhood, I would say to them if their tail light or headlight is out, well, that's a safety issue. Now I'm doing a teachable moment. And if you hit the brakes, it's going to blind the person behind you. So when do you think you can get it fixed? And I heard the same conversations that we would hear in my neighborhood while I get my check on the 1st or the 15th. So then I would say, do you have money in that check to get this fixed? And they'd say, no, but they had it in the next one. And so I said, okay, well, I've got your address, and you're giving me, the only thing you can give me is your word. So you're telling me that you're going to get it fixed on this day. I'm going to come by, and if it's not fixed, I'm going to put a tag on your car. That's what you could do in the old days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so going through that, it got to the place where, okay, I didn't tag them, but somebody else tagged them. They didn't have the money. Then it would go into a warrant. And I'm thinking, okay, we got to solve, in my mind, we got to solve this problem. So I ended up going to Menards and buying a roll of reflective tape. And if they talked to me right, I'd say, here, I can't do this, but if you put this over your lens, then nobody else will pull you over, but I still need you to get this fixed because this tape isn't going to stay on there. Well, then when I was going through that process, if they had a headlight out, that was a bigger deal. And so I would, because I had been a city planner, I had worked with the district councils, and so I knew the owner of the funeral home on my beat, who was the president of the Rice Street Businessmen's Association. And so I went to them on my day off and said, this is what I see from your residents and customers. Can you give me some coupons to send them to the gas station on Maryland and Rice where they can get it fixed, and I'll put a date on it when they say they're going to pay them. Out of the whole time I did that, I only had one person that didn't do what they said, because I always said, the only thing you can give me is your word. And I was there all the time. So it was funny, because when they decided that they were going to move me, that was a whole nother story. The community went down and said, hey, don't move her. We got people you can move, but leave her there.
Leave her there. Where policing is now is different than how I saw policing when I was growing up. So when I thought about policing growing up, I think about Officer Manning, right? I think about Red Presley. I think about folks that were embedded in community and that we had a relationship with, and we were proud of them and proud to be connected. And they were in our schools, and I was never afraid to have them in the schools. Is that still the culture for people coming in, for their families and their communities, from your lens? And if not, when did you start to see the shift?
Well, I had the same growing up that you did. We had a white officer, Selle. Everybody in the whole black community knew Selle. 6'7" tall white guy. And he was back then he was the beat officer. And if you were doing something wrong and he saw you, he'd say, hey, listen, come here, young person, or whoever he was talking to. He said, that's not the right behavior, and I don't want to see you doing that again. And then if he saw you doing something later on that he's already talked to you about, back in the day, he would take you back behind the garage and explain it to you.
Mm-hmm. No, he'd explain it.
He'd explain it to you.
Okay.
And then on the third time, if he saw you, he would bring you to your family's door and tell your parents. And the parents knew in the community that you had already had 3 shots. And so it wasn't a question of whether they weren't going to believe him, because his reputation had been, hey, I've talked to him, I've tried to explain it to him, and now I need you to do whatever it is you need to do to help them correct this behavior, because it's going to get them in trouble or get them hurt or whatever the situation is. And so that was in the old days. And so that's what I grew up with. Somebody that was caring and really wanted you to do your best and be on your best behavior.
What advice or what did you say to your 3 out of 4 children that went into law
Oh my
enforcement?
God, I told him go
What
get
did you say to your son when he was here on the north side on May 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th? What did you say to them to keep them in the positions they're in now?
Yeah, I don't know why they do it.
No, but you had to say something to them.
I just said be safe and, and understand, especially now during those days, there's a heightened awareness out in the community, and it doesn't even make a difference that you're an officer of color because you're just representing that uniform. They don't see the color, and you just have to make sure you're safe. And with after that incident,
George Floyd.
I think that's the turning point nationally, because it went not only nationally, it went international. And, it was that was the thing that I think just knocked the wind out of law enforcement, because everybody was tying all the law enforcement to that one incident.
Yeah. How did that make you feel, right? Having dedicated your life and knowing that your children are dedicating their life, what were you wrestling with in that period about the field that you have been so connected to?
Well, I just look at that video and I just saw so many things that were wrong. I mean, from my perspective, so many things that were wrong. You've got people that are looking at an action being taken by a police officer. You've got another officer standing there with his back, not looking at what the officer's doing, but telling the public to stay back. You have that officer not responding to the paramedic or the person that said, he's not breathing. I'm a paramedic or a nurse or whatever they were.
She was an EMT.
EMT.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I can help, and nothing was coming through. So I don't know what was going through his mind. But that was the beginning of the breakdown in trust, as far as I'm concerned. Disregard what's happening right here. The breakdown is here because here's somebody trying to offer a service and you're not being responsive to that.
Yeah. And then we have Officer Jamal Mitchell, who was dedicating his life into service to this community, who lost his life. And what has been refreshing in the midst of this tragedy is to see the community broadly honor him.
Well deserved for the stuff that he did. And to, like you say, broadly see across the board the number of people that have came out to honor him. But everyone's talking about how he did his job in a year and a half. Saving 2 elderly people out of a burning house. The last thing he had done, I can't remember, but he was doing public service, and people were recognizing that and saying that to the broader public. So it's those kinds of people, and he was 36 years old, so he came in at an older age.
Yeah.
When I look at younger people, people always say, can we get more young people in? And since I say I teach, so I'm talking to young people. And when you listen to young people, now this is Debbie Montgomery saying this, they want a badge and a gun. And I keep telling them, that's not what this job is all about. You get the badge. That gun should be your last item. How well are you going to be able to communicate to somebody in crisis? And how are you going to be able to bring resources to that person in crisis? And that's what he did, from what everybody was saying, on how he did that job. Now, I think a lot of it is the fact that he was 36 years old and had lived these experiences. He had, 3 or 4 kids?
Yeah.
And so he knew what it was to have a family. He knew what the expectations were for his kids and his family. And he wanted to share that with the people that he had contact with. And I think I did that when I was on. And so it's, once again, looking inside of yourself and saying, what are your strengths and how can I bring them to this job to be a public servant?
Yeah.
Debbie, in St. Paul, we have the academy, the LEPCA, the LEPCA program. And we had some wonderful young women that were going through that program. They were sensational in the community. Why couldn't we keep them in St. Paul as police officers?
I think our process was taking too long. I think other departments were hiring before we were because they could get a job. And the other thing too, and this is something that both Minneapolis and St. Paul city councils need to deal with. We are the major big cities, and we get less paid than the suburbs. You can work for Blaine Police Department as a starting police officer and start at $96,000 a year. Now, I don't know how much action they got in Blaine, but I know they don't have as much as Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Well, for the people listening, you heard her pounding that table. $96,000 a year. So if you have a heart for service and you believe that the route for us to have more justice is to be in relationship with the community in ways that is respectful, that identifies their needs and connects them to what they need, it sounds like this could be a good living.
It is. It is. And like I say, we just need to make sure that they're paid well, that they have the proper training and equipment, and that their heart is in the right place to be a public servant.
Yeah. So, Ms. Debbie, so in that question that Dawn just asked you was, we have some people in the pipeline. We know we don't have as many people in the pipeline. So in this, you identified a process issue, the process, the timeline, pay equity, and parity with our neighboring suburbs. Are there other barriers that you think that police departments should be thinking about if they are truly interested in recruiting more women, people of color, community-minded people into the police force?
Internally, I just think that the officers, like in our LATC program, that the officers are respectful of them as they're in those programs, so that they know they have the respect internally of the possible people that they're going to be working with. I think that's really important. And I think, I'm not bragging. I like St. Paul. I think our officers are doing the right things. And our leadership, our administration, is committed to making sure that they have the opportunities for growth. I mean, that's another thing. That young man that came in at 36, he doesn't want to be on the street forever. Maybe he does.
Yeah.
But, I would think that at some point he wants to get promoted to be a supervisor and, to have the training necessary to train young people that are coming in. I talked to our chief in St. Paul, and he's actually, I just think I got an email, I got to remember, I think it was from him, sending our officers to training. And that cost a lot of money. So I suggested to him, I said, why don't we host it and get these other departments to pay to come to subsidize the training? And then I was part of FBI LEDA, I was part of the law enforcement training nationally, NOBLE, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NBPA, National Latino Police Officers Association, National Asian Officers Association. And then, as the white guys say to me, well, how come they got their associate? I said, well, you got FOP, okay? Back in the day, you wouldn't let us in, so let's be honest.
Yeah.
I said, now, no, but we all of you all can join these organizations.
I know what FOP is, but what's FOP?
Fraternal Order of Police.
Okay.
And it's you don't have to be Asian or Black or Latino to join these organizations. And I've been a senior advisor to all of them. I want to know how those cultures work. And who can better do that than to join these organizations with these officers and share their upbringings and their stuff so that it helps make you a better officer on dealing with the public.
Yeah, what I like about what you just shared with us in that, and where you were able to get additional training, access, and network, is that being in law enforcement isn't just, because sometimes you do think about the badge that got in the car, right? Car chases, beats, running after people, right? Arresting people. But there's so much more to the profession, and so much opportunity for people to be developed and have access to provide service in different ways. So you don't have to stay in the car on a midnight shift throughout your career. There's other types of roles and responsibilities that you can grow into. Can you share what some of that might look like?
Well, young people like today we've got technology. We now have drones, So especially these young people, they're all into this drones and these other technology, AI and all of that stuff that's coming into it. And those are skills that we need. And so, those are great opportunities, because now I know St. Paul just used, the kid that got lost over there, and they had a drone up trying to look. So, there's so much in there to look versus just thinking you're going to be in a squad car driving around. If you've got skills to bring to this, I guarantee you the departments are going to use you and use that skill.
Yeah, I'd like to actually give the police department a shout out, because I did watch the press conference that they did, and I think they did a really good job of navigating the pain of community, and also being open to understand if there's something else that we could have did differently. We're open to do that, but we were trying to make sure that the K-9 could follow the tracks. Like, there's so many things that often the public doesn't know is part of the consideration. And there's a lot of things that the department doesn't know that's part of our consideration. And so do you think that we'll be able to bridge sort of the differences of reality at any point given the current climate?
I think so. I just think it's how do we present it to people. And it's kind of interesting now, because I look at all it, like downtown St. Paul. I don't know about downtown Minneapolis, because I don't know what goes on over here. But downtown St. Paul is vacant because people are working from home. And yet data has shown, because of that 2 years of COVID and our kids being locked up and doing Zoom, that they don't know how to look you in the eye. I don't know if you've been talking to young people lately. They don't know how to look you in the eye.
Yeah.
And their communication skills are all on this and not what we need to do to communicate. Doing this isn't breaking down somebody that's got an issue going on. And so we have got to deal with the fact that there are mental health issues going on in our public with our youth and our older people. And these are some of the things that the police are going to see when they come out of those homes or those business offices and they're out on the street. That mental health thing is going on, and it's a lack of that communication.
And there's a lot of people, mental health is certainly intersecting deeply in the police departments and our health systems. And so this is another route that if people are interested in those that are suffering with mental health challenges, this is another way to serve and to protect them, because they really honestly most times cannot help what they're going through. So in the situation we've talked about, drones, we got the K-9, then the horses, they downtown riding horses. I'm like, what? Is there a special academy for this part?
Yep, there are. Yeah.
Is there?
So there is. You actually have to go and learn how to make sure the horse is being handled, so that most of the time they use it for crowd control. Otherwise, it's just PR to go up and down the streets. But mainly, and to have horses like St. Paul, we don't have any. We used to have one. I don't know if Minneapolis has any now. Yeah. But the thing is that they're expensive. The upkeep, the putting them in stalls or whatever you put them in, all of that costs money. And so I go back to, especially Minneapolis and St. Paul, do we want to spend that money on the horse care, or do we want to increase the pay for the officers?
What say you?
I say you need to get some officers, so you need to increase the pay and let them horses eat that hay a little less.
What you got, Dawn?
Debbie, I'm going to go back to training.
Yes.
In St. Paul, I know that when we have women that are in the academy, you go out and support them.
I do.
And why do you support them?
Because I want them to know that this is a good profession and that they have skills that they can bring to it. And I just want them to, once again, look inside of themselves and identify with their strengths. And remember that, I think we as women are very much more communicative, and to make sure we use those skills. And I want them to know that not only me, but there's other officers female officers that are here to support them. I mean, the International Association of Women Police, the Minnesota Association of Women Police. I mean, we're here to do whatever it is. If you're having an issue in the academy and your cadre, your academy cadre isn't addressing it, give us a call. I mean, we can make that phone. I know I make my phone call to my chief all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you're an advocate,
Yes.
and you've had to do that your whole life. But there's a lot of people out here, maybe Chanda, myself, we could be advocates, but we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know how to get involved in those situations. We don't know how to help. We'll support. We're there for the graduations. But as we're getting women into these positions, what are we doing after they graduate? What are we doing after they finally come in? And I don't know how many police officers that are women in St. Paul do we even have.
There is a breakdown, but we've got quite a few women. And Amanda Hugh, who's like chief of staff to Chief Axel, she just got an award. I saw her on TV getting some award. It's something, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I just ran into her, I think it was at the Lynx game. She got the award at the Lynx game, her and another officer. So organizations like the Lynx, Women's Pro Sports, that's another one. And I think when you ask where can you recruit, in the old days, I used to say we need to go to the colleges or even the high schools and look for the athletes. And it's not that you have to be an athlete, but I don't know what the physical agility tests are today, but you have to be able to you got to get over fences. And like I think in the law now, you can't have a 6-foot fence in the cities anymore, or maybe you can.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah, I think, because, trying to get over a 6-foot wall, whatever. But anyway, looking for people that have just basic physical skills to be able to get through that. Being able to run.
But what if I wanted to be in law enforcement? I didn't want to be in the cop car. I don't want to do none of that. Is there a route to not do that?
You have to go through all of that to get the job you want.
Yeah.
What if I want to be an investigator?
You have to still start out everybody starts out on the street. That's where you learn what the issues are. How do you know what to investigate if you're not out on the street seeing what the issues are?
Chicago PD.
Yes.
That's what I watch.
Oh.
That's where my training has happened. Law and order. That's where I got my training.
I don't think that's going to help you.
Okay.
But one of the things with the LEPCA in St. Paul, what I think is great, and maybe Minneapolis does it, but those young people that are studying and going through that program before they go into the academy, they are placed in community.
Yes.
So they are placed at parks, nonprofits. They are placed there, and they are working with those young people every single day.
Yep.
Well, okay. So the other thing that comes up often is that people say that folks that go into policing should have to live where they police. Do you believe that should be a policy?
Well, first of all, it's against the law because we tried to do that back when I was on the job. So legally, we can't do it. Do I think it's an advantage? Yes.
Why?
Because you know the area, you know the public you're serving, and you can understand the vibe that's going on in a city or the community.
You know the nuances.
The nuances of what's going on. It's nice for you to, work in St. Paul or Minneapolis and live out in, God knows, Maple Grove or someplace that I don't know how to get to. But, so there's a disconnect there.
Yeah. What if you want to police in your neighborhood, but your cousins and them are complicated?
Well, you know what? I policed in my neighborhood, and I yank the chain and say, hey, listen, you all got to straighten up, and just be honest with them. To this day, and I say this not bragging, I have people that I have arrested, and my husband and I would be walking through the mall, and somebody will say, if it was when I was a sergeant or a lieutenant or whatever, Officer Montgomery, do you know who I am? No, I don't remember. So then they explained to me, well, you arrested me, and ever since then I haven't been in trouble. I mean, I'm thinking, well, and they got their kids with them or their wife with them, and I'm thinking, wow, So I'm glad that they feel comfortable about saying that in public years after we've had an encounter.
Mm-hmm. I know, it would only take once for me. I'm good. I don't need to go back. I don't need those cuffs on me no more. I mean, I think that, like, when I think about my interactions with police, and I've had a lot of interactions. I can't say I've had all the interactions. I've had a lot of interactions. I've had sons that have had negative encounters. I've had a son that was beat up. I have been pulled over for having an air freshener on my rear view window, and I've had guns drawn on me. And I remember the officer told me because there was a rape in the neighborhood, and I'm looking at him and he's looking at me, and I was dumbfounded. Do you think I did that, sir? There's just some real questionable behavior that logically just didn't even make sense for the behavior that I was in. And then I shared with you before that I met Chris Arneson when my cousin was murdered. And it was about Arneson, but it was also about, and I will say that my cousin was going through the community service officer program. And I remember the day that the verdict was read, and there was a courtroom full of officers that showed up. And I've had these moments where I've gotten to see the departments from different lenses. And at this point, I'm a family who's been victimized by this unfortunate incident that ended my cousin's life. And I also watched them deal with his mother and his father and us with a great deal of empathy and care, without them knowing what the outcome was, but their commitment to getting up on that stand and having to testify. To some of them had relationships with him. I got to see it a little bit more intimately. And so it expanded what I saw was possible in policing, because I think that if you only have the negative encounters, you don't want to be part of that. Right. And I do think that we see too much of the negative. And so do you think that our police departments are sharing enough of the stories of those in law enforcement that are actually these type of day-to-day encounters like you are sharing? Because most of us don't see that. Especially if there's a whole swath of us that never come into interaction with police. So all you see was what's on TV and what people are saying their experiences are.
Well, that's interesting, because I look at the same shows you look at, and I just think, why don't you show the positive of what we do? They tend to show the negative of what we do, and that's what people see.
Yeah.
And in your case, where you brought up that in the courtroom there was empathy and things like that, most of us that are on the job, and I mean this sincerely, from the officers that I know, we want to do a public service. We're not here. We don't get any kudos. You know, I don't see a lot of us getting the Medal of Honor or whatever it is. If it's something big, yeah. But, you know, how many times does somebody say, hey, job well done? How about the supervisor after you do a good job on the job? How many supervisors at the end of your shift say, hey, you know, you really did a good job handling that? You know, so it's those kinds of things to kind of let you know that somebody recognized that you did something well, and especially if it's a supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've known you for these last few years, and I've seen the fight you have for community, and it is your community. And I believe you growing up in the Rondo community, that is one of the biggest bases for the woman that you are and the love that you have. And there's not many people that can pick up the telephone and make all these phone calls. And you talk about community and getting back to it. What was the one thing about that Rondo community that shaped you to the woman that you are now? And it might not just be one.
The difference that I see today, and I say this to my students, when I grew up, we grew up in a village. People cared about you. First of all, the village, they knew you, and they cared about you. And if you were doing something wrong, you know, they had no problem saying, hey, young lady, what family do you belong to? You know, that behavior isn't good. And, you know, I would hope that you can change that. And then they kind of, you know, talk to you and explain to you what you did and why you shouldn't have done it. Today, you try to talk to one of these young people.
Not just young.
Well, you talk to anybody, and nobody is paying any attention to you, and they don't have a vested interest. In the day, they had a vested interest in you because they wanted you to be successful.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the, you know, I live in Minneapolis, in the neighborhood that I live in. I haven't moved from, and my family has been there for lots of generations. And one of the reasons is when I was raising my kids, I still experienced that, right? Because we have a lot of family that is around. So I'm like, you can go next door, you can go to the next block if you want to, but your grandma live over there, right? Mm-hmm. Or you can go up the street. Mm-hmm. And there is something that's quite special about the neighborhoods that many describe as problematic, because within it broadly, there's still these pockets of really, really strong communities that are embedded in this narrative that it is dangerous beyond words.
Well, I still live in the Rondo neighborhood, and I know the families that were troubled, and I know the kids and the grandkids. And, you know, when I'm out, I don't have a problem. Say, how you doing? You know, what's going on in your life? And, you know, I know you, hey, I know your grandma, I know your mom. You know, what's going on? Are you okay? Do you need anything? I mean, I've got young people that come up to me. It's Officer Montgomery. Their parents or somebody told them. I said, yeah, okay, hi. Mm-hmm. You know, but
it's important that they see you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's part of it, is that you really can't see. And I think that that's one of the barriers, because they are growing up with their faces in their phones and on social media, and they do get to see the worst of many things, including law enforcement. And those things exist. Like, you know, in this conversation, I want to be clear that I'm not sidestepping the problem, but I do think it's important for us to address the problem, and that if policing is still going to exist, which I believe it was going to, you know, it's going to exist in some format in the near future, then those people that have an interest in serving this community and making sure that we're safe should enter it, so that we can all be better.
Yeah, I agree. I just think, as Dawn said, you know, I'm on several neighborhood committees. You know, I engage with young people. We got a family night coming up, I think tomorrow, down at MLK or someplace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So wait, so you're retired, but you teach.
And what do you teach?
Law enforcement.
Where?
at MCTC.
Have you had students that you would not recommend to become police officers?
I have, and told them that.
And have you had students that you will make sure that they become the best police officers?
I have, and I work with them and tell them, these are your strengths, and I see that you would be very good at this profession, but I need you to do A, B, C, and D.
And what about the ones that will not be good?
I always tell them, and the dean gets mad at me. I said, this is not the profession for you. Well, you can't tell them that. What do you mean I can't tell them? I mean, they don't have the right attitude, the right mentality, and, you know, they need to go get a job doing something
by themselves.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you know, I tell them, you know, I just say, you know, you just don't have you have not shown me the skills that I think are necessary for you to be successful in this profession.
And what are those skills?
Being able to have communication, being able to have some empathy, some ability to learn how to navigate systems. I mean, I really am a big advocate. I told my officers when I was on the job, my students, I said, you need to have a notebook in your pocket with these contact numbers. And I tell my students this. Don't have the 1-800 number to the social service downtown. You call downtown to the social service group and say, help me understand what areas you have and who is the supervisor or who is somebody I can contact. And then you, on your own time, I tell the students, call and say, hey, I'm a student in law enforcement, and I'm really trying to understand what services you provide and who do if I needed to have somebody in this, who would I have them call? Not the 1-800 number, because if you're in crisis, you need somebody that can answer the phone and that can deal with your crisis. Now, it may not be the right person, but after they hear what your issue is, they can transfer you to that right person.
Yeah.
And those are the things I do.
Yeah, you just reminded me. So we are recording this conversation from Oak Park Neighborhood Center, which is ran by Pillsbury United Communities. And I was a CEO here for 7 years. But before I was in that role, I started here in this building as a director. And the very first week, and I remember this officer, and I'm going to mess up her name, but I feel like her name was Officer Carol, like Osterhaus or Osterhus or something like that. But anyway, Officer Carol came here my first week. And I mean, you know, I'm quiet. I just came here to do the job. Give me the paperwork. I'll write the emails and I'll gather the staff. That's what I came to do, right? And to help the babies. And so she comes up the stairs. She comes in the building and she said, I'm so glad you're here. Let's go door to door and introduce you to the neighborhood so they know that you're here. So that's not really my jam. I don't want to do it. And she's like, come with me. We're going to go door to door. And as a matter of fact, I want you to start at this house a couple blocks up the street because there's 3 kids that live there and their mom went to jail yesterday. And I don't think I will ever forget that. She brought me straight to that house, to that grandmother that was there. And they're like, she got this brand new job and she's here to help your family. And she pulled me, I'm from this neighborhood. She pulled me out of what my perception of the role was to be in community in a different way, to understand what the story was. Brought me right to that door. We went door to door up and down these blocks. And I remember thinking that I don't think there was another officer from the 4th precinct that did that for subsequent directors here in Minneapolis. Now, I don't know all people's stories, so I might be overstepping, but I just thought, like, if that's not a community policing action, and it's one that I can absolutely get behind. There's behaviors I'm never getting behind, but that right there, I've appreciated her for that.
And that's one of the things when I was talking about, stepping out and making those contacts in community. And the fact that she may have been an investigator or may have been the officer that made the arrest, so she understood the situation. When she made the arrest, she may have seen that there were 3 kids there. when she made the arrest and for whatever it was, is there somebody here that can watch your kids because I have to arrest you and take you downtown? I mean, all of those things have to be thought out, so that it's just not slam bam, thank you, ma'am, I'm going to take you downtown because you did A, B, C, and D. How do we keep that family and those kids safe?
Yeah, because if you're stripping me for my kids, I'm escalating. If
Exactly.
you don't I might go with you, but I need to make sure they're okay.
Exactly.
And someone needs to understand that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we know that there's people out there that would be a great asset into the force. And, I have said this, that our police force has shrunk, and we've brought in some additional ways in which community can navigate some of the issues and get them to the right place. And I'm supportive of that. But what I have said is that, if the police force shrinks to 10 people, we don't need all their names to be Derek Chauvin. We need to have those 10 people, those 20 people, those 200 people, or whatever it is on the force, to have a heart for community and keeping the public safe. And frankly, I think that when that respect is mutual, I would imagine that it supports the safety of our peace officers as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
I love you with all my heart and soul. And you have been there for me when I first started working in St. Paul, when y'all didn't want to accept me because I crossed the river. I've got great photos of us. And you were there for me. And you have been there for every person that I can think of. I'm going to just mention Brittany Baker going through the St. Paul Fire Academy. You were there when she was out there running and trying to get through that. We can call you for anything. I don't know if you've given Chanda one of your
my words of wisdom.
But I think Miss Chanda needs to get one. I've appreciated your honesty, even when it might not be what someone wants to hear. I've appreciated your honesty, and I appreciated when we were going through everything when George Floyd was murdered, and the love you still had for community, and out there walking in those streets, out there with the community, and out there still protecting your own son. And I just think we don't have elders like you around in the community that are here on a regular basis. How many years apart between being 4 and being a police officer?
I had 4 kids in 5 years. People thought I was pregnant all the time.
Because you were. Because in fact you were.
I got 2 of them that are 12 months and 2 weeks apart.
Oh man.
So you being a police officer during that time, having those babies at home, and still being in the community where you had to police, you've always done.
Yeah. Well, look, to the folks that are listening, hopefully you've gained a perspective on a side of policing that you had not considered. For those that are looking for what might be next in your career and you're feeling stuck, I would like to just encourage you to think about all the ways that community needs folks that are about community in these roles. If I just go down my own path, right, the detective, the folks that arrested the person that murdered my cousin, to the investigators, to the folks that came in and talked about the blood splatter. Like, there was just so many different ways in which people allowed our family to have our version of justice in that situation. And I know that I would feel not as resolved as I am if I didn't understand what the story was. And there are a lot of families out here that just need to know the story. There's a lot of families that just need help navigating. And there's a lot of families that want to be safe. And there's a role that we all have. And if policing feels like the role, I think Miss Debbie might be someone you could reach out to at MCTC, which I think is now Minneapolis College. I think we all showed our age on that one. But you could reach out there, any of the programs that were mentioned. We need to consider what the community needs and find the best route to get them there. And we have to figure out how to use the systems for our best interest, because they certainly have used it against our best interests. So thank you so much for all that you've done. It's been a pleasure to get to know you over these last couple of conversations, because I've heard so much about you, and just to to understand. I think the piece of information that took me out was the 4 kids in 5 years while being a police officer. If that's not heroic, people, I don't know what it is. But thank you so much, Debbie Montgomery, for being on Conversations with Chanda.
Thank you.
To explore more insightful conversations and stay updated on Chanda Smith Baker's work, visit smithbaker.co.